I'm still Trey Hargett, and today is Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. This morning, we'll be discussing the third quarter 2020 outline Tennessee Quarterly Business Economic Indicators Report. As you know, the report is published through a partnership between my office and Dr. William Fox at the University of Tennessee. The report offers a snapshot of the state's economy based on business data from my office's Division of Business Services. Let me begin by making some key observations from the report. Even though economic activity is still below pre-pandemic peak levels, the Quarterly Business Economic Indicators Report shows signs of economic recovery. There were 6,470 new entity filings, representing a strong 42.2% increase over the same quarter in 2019, which marks 35 consecutive quarters of positive growth year over year. Shelby County saw the largest number of new entity filings and the highest rate of growth, with Davidson County a close second, followed by Hamilton and Knox counties. Together, these four counties accounted for 56% of all new entity filings in Tennessee. After spiking at 15.5% in April, Tennessee's employment rate has trended downward, falling to 6.3% in September. By comparison, the national unemployment rate reached 14.7% in April and fell to 7.9% in September. We'll take questions shortly, but first I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Fox. Dr. Fox?
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be here and talk about the report. One of the things we see in the report is what we've all become accustomed to in the last 6-8 months, and that is the volatility of some economic data. As the Secretary said, we had an extraordinary increase in the number of initial claims in the third quarter. A little bit of that is timing, which has been the result of many of the volatile numbers we've seen. But we believe there are other things going on here as well. We believe that Tennesseans are seeing opportunities. I know the Secretary, as he speaks to the rating agencies around the country, has often noted the fact that the data suggests that Tennessee is a very entrepreneurial state. And so Tennesseans finding new opportunities. And some people, we believe, who had lost their job looking for new career opportunities, seeing opportunities, starting companies. And so while we do think there's some timing effects, we also think that some job creation is taking place here, and hopefully this leads to a stronger Tennessee economy in the long term. In terms of the urban areas, as the Secretary said, the four biggest counties did account for more than half of the new entity filings. But in fact, the growth rates were higher on average outside of those four counties. Shelby County was a unique outlier for sure among the four counties. It had extraordinary initial claims. And let me add again that Shelby County is a place where we've seen a lot of initial claims for unemployment insurance. And so consistent with the notion that some people who lost jobs took this opportunity to start a company, that seems to fit Shelby County really well. As we look more broadly, the economy is showing signs of coming back, and the initial claims have proven to be a good leading indicator. Having said that, as we're all aware, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and the pandemic could, of course, influence the economic outcomes from where we are. But at this point, we are seeing the growth in the right direction, the unemployment rate dropping, and some progress being made there. Now, the October unemployment rate, a month more recent than the Secretary mentioned, did show an increase in the unemployment rate. But in fact, that's heavily attributable to the fact that there was a big increase in the labor force. And also what I would regard as a more reliable business survey showed about 25,000 job increase. And so the employment picture has continued to improve through October. So, Mr. Secretary, there's some comments. I'd be happy, like you, to respond to questions or comments.
For questions, we're going to ask that each media announce their name. Does anyone have questions?
Yes, this is Milt Camps with Venture Nashville.
Hey, Milt, go ahead.
Thank you. This is, I guess, for Dr. Fox. A couple of weeks ago, and I believe it was the budget hearings, you indicated, choosing your words very carefully, of course, that there's reason
I hope I did.
You did. That's one reason I'm asking for a little further guidance on this. You indicated that all parties, including, of course, the governor and the legislature who are formulating a budget for the next fiscal year, would probably be well advised to be very cautious well into the new calendar year. I'm wondering, how do you, what should the legislature and the governor in particular look at closely in preparing their budget proposals? The rate of churn, new formations, dissolutions, unemployment, all that is extraordinary, and though sometimes that's considered an indication of economic dynamism, it's kind of hard to believe that at this moment. Can you provide any updated guidance in terms for those who are formulating budgets?
Sure. Well, I think the Secretary is actually heading to the funding board meeting. We had a funding board meeting that I participated in, I think it was last Wednesday, where I did give a revenue estimate. And I'll admit that I was on the conservative side with my revenue estimate, just to show what you heard in the budget hearing as well, and that is that it's a time for caution. We are seeing more taxes. There's 18 to 20 groups of taxes that we look at, and 7 or 8 of those are actually going to decline relative to last year. No question about that. And so then the question really comes down to how well will the sales tax do? I believe we're going to see decline in the corporate taxes, and so our two big ones, the sales and the corporate, are going to signal where we head. And so the sales tax is off to a good start this fiscal year. We're up 3.7%. That's a great start, particularly in the middle of a pandemic. But that's based in part on consumers, buying a lot of things that they usually don't buy in big numbers. Think of Peloton bikes and kayaks and renovating their house. And the notion that we might get a little bit of a slowdown in that is certainly likely. Now, all this, of course, will be predicated on COVID-19 and what happens to any new stimulus funds out of Washington. And again, if COVID-19 is light and going forward, and there's significant stimulus money, I think we'll easily collect the numbers that I suggested to the funding board the other day. But it's, I think, a time for caution because we are all operating in unprecedented times.
If I can add to that, Dr. Fox, a little bit, and as much value as we place in these statistics, keep in mind that our office collects information regarding corporations, limited liability corporations, limited liability partnerships. That doesn't include sole proprietorships. So there's really another layer of economic activity that isn't even captured by this. Would you agree with that, Dr. Fox?
I absolutely would, and a lot of the job creation that might have happened. In fact, I have a family member who did just what we're talking about, lost his job and started not one but 2 businesses. And they're sole proprietors, so they're not showing up in your data, Mr. Secretary. And so while maybe this isn't the kind of dynamism that was expected, it's still people taking advantage of opportunities and going out and saying, hey, if I'm not able to work where I was before, let's go out and create something. And so it offers the chance for some good dynamism, I think. And as you said, Mr. Secretary, among a lot of other people who aren't showing up in your data even.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Milt.
Yeah, thanks. If I could ask a real quick follow-up. I'm glad you mentioned the sole proprietorships, Mr. Secretary, because Kauffman Foundation found, and I think it was in the wake of the Great Recession, that Tennessee had people starting businesses more out of desperation than inspiration. And the suggestion being that as soon as jobs were available, those were going to disappear to a large degree. So not all churn is of the same lasting economic value, I guess. Do you see, I'm not sure this is part of your portfolio, but do you see within this maybe the need to take a look at further inducements for entrepreneurship, various kinds of support for entrepreneurial businesses?
Mr. Secretary, do you want me to respond to that?
Well, you can, and I have some thoughts as well if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, first, I think one of the things that Tennessee does is attract entrepreneurs because of our favorable rule and regulatory environment that we already have. You look at a state that has low taxes, that has low debt. And I think that's why you typically see more entrepreneurial activity. Like I said, it doesn't even show up in this. So, I know that that's something, though, that the Department of Economic Community Development strive for each and every day, as well as the legislature is trying to figure out how do they create the best environment that we can for small businesses and all businesses. Dr. Fox, you want to add to that?
Well, the only thing I would add is, it may be that, and this is true in the case of my family member, he wasn't looking to leave his job, but he doesn't think of it as desperation. He thinks of it as creating his own livelihood. And if he's successful at it, he has no intention to go back working for the former company. And so, I don't think we should just think of that as all negative, even if people wish it hadn't happened in this fashion.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Richard Lovett at WJCW Radio up in Johnson City, and I guess the question is for Dr. Fox. Any forecast on the all-important Christmas selling season that we're in right now as far as sales tax collections?
Well, I think they'll be good over the next couple of months. And there's a variety of reasons why that's going to take place. First of all, because of this Wayfair case that was decided in the Supreme Court 2 years ago, we're now collecting sales tax on most online sales. And the General Assembly put in place what's called marketplace facilitator legislation in October. I think that will further enhance the amount of sales tax revenue we get. So what's part of what's going to be happening is we're simply going to do a better job of collecting the tax that's due than we were able to a couple of years ago. And so that's going to stimulate revenues. And then in addition to that, I do think we're going to see people out continuing to spend relatively more of their dollar on sales taxable events. One of the things that really happened with COVID-19 is it shifted people away from elective surgery, away from traveling by plane. I mean, things that we all know, but I note those things because they're not sales taxable. And when we shifted people to Peloton bikes and even eating at home, we're sales taxing all of these things. And because people are tending to stay home more, where they're sales taxing it in Tennessee. And while people are tending to stay home, one place we do see some evidence of tourism taking place is people coming to Tennessee because, many folks from surrounding states can drive here. And so the sales tax has performed, I think, quite well in this environment, and it probably will continue to. That's my forecast, and the others who met with the funding board last week expect the same thing. And so I think it will be a relatively jolly season.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Stevenson with the Tennessean. In your report, unemployment insurance tax and stimulus payments caused a balloon in quarter two nominal personal income.
Yes.
What do you anticipate will happen in December when the Federal CARES Act unemployment programs expire? I mean, we still have nearly 125,000 Tennesseans unemployed, according to the most recent state data.
Right. Yeah. So as the report says, transfer payments and UI being the largest of those, but others as well, the $1,200 that many households receive being also in that group, just ballooned in Tennessee and in all other states as well. And that was an important reason why the sales tax continued to perform well, and the economy has come back as vigorously as it has. We were paying out $340 million a week in UI benefits in May. And it has fallen already to about $30 million a week as fewer people are on unemployment and the enhanced federal unemployment has already gone away. And so, if as the CARES Act expires, we don't continue to have strong job creation or a new stimulus program, I think we'll see it a negative on the economy in the first quarter of 2021. And it's already pretty clear that federal stimulus, which was huge in the second quarter, big on historical standards, but much smaller in the third quarter, will be very small in the quarter we're in right now. And then if it continues to fall in the first quarter of next year, it will result in a somewhat slower U.S. economy and Tennessee economy. And that's, again, these are the reasons why I'm being cautious about my sales tax expectations once we get into next year.
All right, thank you. And another quick question. The report states that there's 155,000 fewer workers in Tennessee today than there were prior to the pandemic. Does that mean fewer workers or fewer jobs?
Yeah, so first of all, the numbers are a good deal lower than that now. We're down more in the October non-agricultural jobs suggest 110,000 fewer than October of last year. So, as I said, one thing about this era is we have to just keep following the data, every day and every week, as they just keep changing in pretty radical ways. But still, a lot of people with fewer jobs. And the point that I made to the funding board last week is that we've had two kinds of effects in the pandemic. One effect is that as you say, jobs either went away temporarily or permanently. And my guess is that at the other end of the pandemic, a bunch of jobs that existed in, say, January, February of this year will no longer exist as the retail sector and the restaurant sector, as examples, continue to transition. This was already taking place. It's just been accelerated. But the other thing that I emphasized is that a lot of people are not in the position to work in the same way they were before the pandemic. I'm thinking of people who need to stay home and provide child care or help their children if they're engaged in remote learning. And some people who are still afraid, to be a frontline person in the COVID-19 era. And so I think it's both sides that have been impacted. There are some jobs that have been shut down, but there's also some people who aren't comfortable or aren't able because of their own life situations to be in the labor force. And so a very complicated era, that we're all going through here.
All right, thank you so much.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, hi.
Okay. Before we have the next question, I'm just going to ask everyone again to please mute. Somebody is typing, and I'd like to make sure everybody's on mute. Okay, great. And I heard someone chime in. They have another question.
This is Dave Flusser with the Chattanooga Times Free Press. Just wondering on why the business dissolutions were down as well. I understand why more people are starting businesses in a pandemic, but am I reading this right that people going out of business are down, or why would there be fewer dissolutions during a period of pandemic when a lot of restaurants, retail stores, and everything seem to be going out of business?
Yeah, Dave, the Secretary may want to comment about that as well, but I think we are getting some timing effects going on here. And so a lot of the dissolutions that take place are, in fact, an administrative practice by the Secretary's office, and some of that has been delayed to the fourth quarter that would otherwise have been done in the third quarter. And so we don't read very much into what's happening in that particular data point.
Secretary Hargett has had to leave the call.
Okay, I knew he was going to leave. I just wasn't sure if he had done it yet. So, but that's what I was seeing. It's just a timing issue.
Yeah. Can you talk about the churn? I mean, it's great to have more people start businesses, but are we going to see more go out of business as well in this current economy, or?
Yeah, no question that's happening too, and again, some of the people who I think are out starting businesses were employees before. Some of them, that is, they didn't own or operate a business; they were working for somebody. So that's some of the churn that's taking place. But it's clear that some companies are going out of business. They always are, but it's made worse now. And if you look at what's happened in terms of, I'm just thinking of the retailing side where we're able to see month by month very detailed data. There's just such diverse performance in terms of sales. And so, sporting goods stores and home repair stores are booming, while small clothing stores and restaurants are really being hit hard by the loss of customers. And so it's a very uneven picture for sure, and there will be businesses go out of operation as a result of this. And some things were done, as we all know, to try to help the companies through the early months of the pandemic. But the problem is, continuing, and so I do think we'll see a bunch of businesses go away. But having said that, I want to emphasize a point I just kind of mentioned in passing before, and that is most of the things we're seeing from COVID-19 in terms of their economic effects were happening anyway. What COVID-19 did was to really accelerate the pace at which these took place. And so, there already was movement to online sales with very fast growth in that area, and very slow growth in store purchases. There's already big changes in where clothing was being purchased, and so forth. And so a lot of these things would have happened anyway. They just would have happened much more slowly. And so the challenge for Tennessee and for the country is, how do we accommodate change which occurs so rapidly? We're used to having, more time to see these things through, and COVID-19 has simply not permitted that.
Next
Dr.
question.
Dr. Fox, this is Robert Houck with the Johnson City Press. I noted that in one part of the report, it suggests that continued economic growth will depend on public policies measures. What are you looking from the General Assembly and the governor in the next few months as far as coping with the conditions? I know they change rapidly, but what would you hope that would come from the governor and from the General Assembly?
Well, let me say that in that part of the report, our reference was particularly to federal policy. As a general rule, my personal view is that policies intended to support the economy in a short-term sense should be mostly undertaken at the national level and not the state level. The national government has the ability to run deficits, to move money from the faster growing part of the country to the slower growing part, and so forth, things that don't exist within the state. And so in a state that has a relatively small but well-run government, we're not in nearly the same kind of position, and in my view shouldn't be in the kind of position to do the kind of programs that the federal government did through its stimulus packages so far, and hopefully there will be one of some size still coming in the next several months. I think what the General Assembly does, has, based on the evidence we see over time, done a pretty good job of, is to set the broad environment in which business can operate. And so, appropriate taxes and providing good education and infrastructure and keeping regulations to the right amount and so forth. I mean, this is the kind of thing that states need to be doing. And my guess is that's where the General Assembly will continue to focus in its session in next term. Now, having said that, it may be that there are people out there with ideas on stimulating the economy. I haven't personally heard them. And in any event, I'm sure they will be small on the standards of what the national government has done and may continue to do.
I have a question about the trademarks.
Whoa. You may be getting out of my expertise to be able to...
Okay, yeah. In the report, it also cites, trademark data, and I'm just wondering, are you getting that from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, or where?
So all of the data that we report in here comes to us from the Secretary of State's office. And I'll be honest enough to tell you, I'm not sure. I'm sorry the Secretary had to leave, because he could probably tell you exactly where they get that data, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is Jesse Mayshark at Compass in Knoxville, and I have a question about the Knox County numbers for business filings. Noting that our increase is a little bit smaller than the other major metros, I'm wondering if that's our drop in employment was also a little smaller than most of the other major metros. Is there a correlation between those things? Fewer people unemployed means fewer people starting new businesses?
Jesse, that's consistent again with what I was saying before, and you're kind of anticipating that it does look like places where there were a lot of initial claims also were places where more businesses were starting. I'm interpreting this as folks going out and trying to get a business going, and as you noted, Knox County, and this I'm obviously in Knox County as I'm giving this call. Knox County was not impacted nearly as much as Shelby County and Davidson County, for example, and what we're seeing is fewer businesses started. And so I think it's consistent with that notion. If you were able to keep your job, you're less likely to be out starting something as well.
Thank you. That is all the time we have today. We will be posting this call again at sos.tn.gov today. We thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Julia Bruck, Communications Director for Secretary of State Trey Hargett. Thank you again for joining us.